Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNativeBloodyElbow.com, and I'm here to have no fun. We've got the MMA bunker. We are down in the MMA bunker. We've got the light on. It's an emergency session. Jon Jones, UFC light heavyweight champion, the best combat sports athlete on the planet, the most dangerous man alive, has screwed up again. He screwed the pooch. He was arrested by the Albuquerque police on a felony fleeing the scene of an accident warrant. This is serious business. He's accused of having run a red light or a stop sign and hit the car carrying a pregnant woman on the driver's side, breaking the woman's arm, and then fleeing the scene, coming back to get some cash, and then fleeing the scene again, leaving behind a marijuana-filled pipe and papers proving that he had rented said vehicle. So that means he probably can't fight Anthony Rumble Johnson at UFC 187. I know this hurts me more than it hurts you, fans, because I make a living covering this sport, and without Jon Jones and Anthony Rumble Johnson, this year is not going to be what it could have been for the UFC. It's not going to be what it could have been for those of us in the MMA business, but here's the deal. We got to bite the bullet. They got to punish this guy. They cannot let Jon Jones fight while he's been arrested, been charged, presumably will be indicted by the time of the fight on May 23rd. You just can't have a guy who's got unanswered felony charges representing the organization, carrying the organization's belt, and by organization I mean Ultimate Fighting Championship, of course. You can't have that. You know, Floyd Mayweather has committed acts of domestic violence, and Floyd Mayweather went to jail. Mike Tyson was convicted of rape, and Mike Tyson went to jail. Both of their boxing careers resumed after they did their jail time. Jon Jones is going to have to pay the consequences. Maybe he won't get jail time. I hope he won't. I think the kid screwed up. I don't think this was a crime of malice, although I think fleeing the scene while there's injured people that you've harmed is pretty chicken shit, and I think it should be a felony. The woman could have bled to death and could have died, and he was busy thinking about himself and running away. I mean, that is anything but admirable conduct, and it's felonious conduct. So I've got to agree with Kenny Florian and Kevin Iole and other people that are calling for him to be stripped of the title and to have the fight against Anthony Rumble Jones canceled. This guy has to face some consequences for his actions, and more importantly, the UFC cannot put on a pay-per-view with a arrested, potentially indicted felon, accused felon, on the top of the card representing their organization and wearing their belt. They just cannot do it. They're still trying to get regulated in New York. They will make more money in the short term if they put on the Jones Rumble fight. I guarantee you it will draw eyeballs. People will pay to see that. But in the long term, it will be a fiscal disaster for them if they go forward with this fight. They've got to pull Jones off the card. They've got to strip him of his title. That you just can't have a guy representing an organization who's behaving this way. And that's because we have a thing called civilization. Even though we like to watch violent people fight in cages, it's in a controlled environment. Human beings are very naturally violent, naturally anarchic, but we've tried to tamp down and control those impulses and listen to the angels of our better nature with little things called laws and rules and regulations. We at least like to pretend that we are not violent animals. We like to pretend we're civilized human beings, and we've got to maintain that pretense or the whole thing falls apart, and we don't want to do that. We do not want to live in chaos and anarchy, cats and dogs living together, the whole bit. Jones has to be stripped of his title. It hurts. It's going to cost the UFC money. It's going to cost MMA media money. It's unfortunate. It sucks. It sucks for the fans. It's a great fight. Jones will not be the same if they have to postpone the fight, potentially for years. Rumble will not be the same if they have to postpone the fight. I doubt there's anybody that they could book for Rumble to face. He's already destroyed Alexander Gustafsson. Daniel Cormier is coming off a loss and definitely doesn't have time to put a training camp together. There's less than a month left for the fight. So they'd have to postpone even for an interim title fight with Anthony Johnson, and Cormier, I think, would be the obvious man who deserves the other shot at the title. Maybe not even an interim title. Maybe make it the real title because you stripped Jones of the belt. You stripped him. The title's vacant. It sucks though because Jones is at his peak. Johnson's at his peak. We want to see this fight. They're both very fearsome, scary individuals, but that's life. That's the way it works. You gotta let the chips fall where they may. You got to rip the Band-Aid off, do what you got to do, And what they got to do is strip Jones of the title and cancel UFC 187's headlining bout against Rumble Johnson. It's not fair to Rumble Johnson, but that's the breaks. Johnson doesn't want to be in the cage with the felon. Johnson's had troubles of his own. That's how it goes. I wish I had more insight to share with you, but I really don't. It's pretty simple. It's pretty clear that Jon Jones is accused of a very serious crime, a felony, that did bodily harm to an innocent person. Whether he's guilty or not, that'll be proven or not proven. That'll be argued in a court of law. But the UFC cannot afford to have a person with an accusation like that hanging over their head representing themselves as the title fighter. Now, they've stood by fighters who were facing charges before. Jeremy Stephens obviously was arrested by Minnesota authorities before a fight based on an assault charge outstanding in Iowa, where he had to be extradited to. And Dana White was insisting Stephens would fight. He didn't fight. Maybe that situation was a little different. I don't know. To me, it was unfortunate, and it set an unfortunate precedent. So it'll be very interesting to see if Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta want to stick by Jon Jones the way they stuck by Jeremy Stephens, because this charge to me is no more or less serious than the charges Jeremy Stephens were accused of, which was assaulting an individual in a bar and doing serious bodily harm. I can't remember, and my bad here, if that was a misdemeanor or a felony, but nonetheless, that was a much lower profile fight. This is going to be one of the biggest pay-per-views of the quarter. This is Jon Jones, their marquee fighter. They've got to take a stand here. They can't let short-term profit interests blind them to the long-term cost of being an association that will promote people that are accused, arrested, potentially indicted of felonies. They just can't do it. It's a terrible look for the organization. This is a sport that was banned for a long time. Zuffa has done incredible work to get the sport regulated in 49 states and accepted around the world as a legitimate sport. And the thing is, legitimate sports follow legitimate rules and follow the laws. And it's just not a good look if they do it. Let's read what Kevin Iole has to say. It would be a symbolic gesture to strip him, but an important measure of symbolism. The UFC will be saying that it meant it when it instituted a fighter code of conduct, and it's not going to let Jones slide because he's a great fighter and a big moneymaker. The UFC can support Jon Jones if they choose. It can offer legal or other assistance. A good employer stands behind its employees when they're in their greatest need, and providing aid or advice would be doing just that. But nonetheless, they've got to strip Jon Jones of his title. I've got to agree with Kevin Iole. I think Iole's been covering the sport for a long time, and it's he knows whereof he speaks. Let's hear what Kenny Florian had to say last night on Fox. He says, "This is a guy who's representing the whole organization. This is the best combat fighter in sports right now. This is the best fighter on the planet. It does not look good for him. He's so much talent, but there's a lot of immaturity coming with that talent. I think cutting him from the UFC would be too harsh, but I have a little bit of compassion. It seems like if this is true, there's some kind of problem going on. He needs help, and it needs to be legitimate help, not getting away for 24 hours. He needs to get out and get help." And that's the thing. Last time Jones got in trouble when he failed a test for cocaine out of competition on December of last year before his fight with Daniel Cormier, he was not suspended, and he did 1 day in rehab, and they said he's all better. So let's let Florian continue. "I think stripping him of the title is appropriate. Of course, if these allegations are true, I think cutting him may be a little bit harsh. I would be for stripping him of the title and getting him to realize there are repercussions. If you screw up, there are repercussions and a possible fine. He was supposed to face Anthony Johnson, and I think that this is the other repercussion. I don't think he should. I don't think he should be allowed to fight Anthony Johnson. He needs to go and get help. I think the UFC probably more likely going to find a replacement for Jon Jones at this point. I think that's going to happen if these allegations are true." So let me read a little more of Kevin Iole's piece because I think it was really excellent. This is on Yahoo Sports. He says, "Jones, of course, is presumed innocent and must be proven guilty in a court of law, but the UFC owes him no such due process and should immediately strip him of its championship and pull him from its May 23rd fight against Anthony Johnson." Let's see. Jones pleaded guilty to DUI in 2012 in Birmingham, New York. In 2014, he got into a misguided brawl in the lobby of the MGM Grand during a photo op to promote an upcoming fight with Daniel Cormier. He showed a great inability to control his emotions, not only when he aggressively went after Cormier, but when he let out a guttural roar after the brawl was broken up. UFC security chief Joe Williams wound up in the hospital as a result, and Jones is simply lucky that nothing worse occurred. Then on December 4th, Jones failed a random drug test. It's almost incomprehensible that an athlete of Jones' stature would be using cocaine during his training camp 30 days before the fight. And then there was Sunday's incident, in which a car allegedly driven by Jones ran a red light and broadsided a car driven by a pregnant woman, according to a police report. He left the scene, but only after returning to grab money from the vehicle. Police reported finding a marijuana pipe in the rental vehicle. Unfortunately for Jones, an off-duty police officer who happens to be a UFC fan saw Jones hop a fence and run away. After being unable to make contact with Jones for more than a day, arrangements were being made late Monday afternoon for Jones to turn himself in. And he did, this is me talking, he did turn himself in. He bailed himself out, $2,500 bond. And back to Iole. The legal process will play out, and the state, if it chooses to pursue the case, will need to prove its allegations beyond reasonable doubt to the satisfaction of a jury. The UFC has no such duty, it's the part I read before, and should strip Jones of its championship immediately. It's a privilege, not a right, to hold the belt, and Jones long ago violated that privilege. He's had a series of run-ins and incidents and has gotten off incredibly light. He has never been forced to miss a fight and has only received minor fines for his various infractions. Now a pregnant woman has suffered a fractured wrist and forearm. Drug paraphernalia was found in the vehicle, and Jones allegedly fled the scene of an accident. The fact that he didn't turn himself in immediately when he knew or reasonably should have known that police were looking for him means the police will assume the worst. They'll assume he stalled so that whatever he may have taken would leave his body. They'll assume he was attempting to keep something from them by fleeing the scene and not immediately turning himself in. If the UFC strips him of his title and he's proven innocent later, the UFC can easily rectify the situation by putting him into an immediate title fight. The UFC can support Jones if they choose. I read that before. But they certainly cannot condone the many circumstances that disturbingly continue to pile up around this man. They've made excuses for his prickly personality and often difficult way in the past. They unbelievably defended the fact he went to drug rehab for one day after the positive cocaine test as if he were somehow magically cured. They've turned their heads and pretended they haven't seen as many social media blunders or as difficult at best interactions with MMA media. More than anything, this seems to be a cry for help on Jones's part. He's a wonderful athlete, but the pressure of living up to what he seems to think he appears to be wearing on him. All right, so that's what Kevin Iole has to say, and I really can't argue with any of it. I think maybe it's a little patronizing in tone. I really don't care about the cry for help. You know, this is a big boy. This is a grown man. It's a business, harsh environment. You know, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, la-di-da. But the deal is the UFC has to do what's best for the UFC and what's best for the sport, and that is cutting Jon Jones, stripping him of the title. I don't know that they need to cut him, but they need to strip him of the title, and they need to pull him from this fight at UFC 187, find somebody else for Rumble to fight for the title, and move on. You know, let the chips fall where they may, do the right thing, and go from there. That's all they can do. So this is Kid Nate at BloodyElbow.com. We're going to continue to keep you abreast of the situation and, you know, do what we can. It's unfortunate. It's a bummer for fight fans, but this is the way of the world. And Jon Jones screwed up. He hurt somebody. He hurt somebody seriously. He's facing felony charges. The UFC can't afford to be associated with somebody like that until he's had his day in court and the charges have been heard and his defense has been heard and the whole situation is resolved. They cannot put this guy on their marquee. They cannot afford to push it. So this is Kid Nate at BloodyElbow.com. Remember to give a like on this disjointed, rambling video. Follow us on Twitter at KidNate, at Bloody Elbow. Subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube, and you'll get all the magic like this here rambling rant. So adios, MMA aficionados. Conor Rubish and Scott Christ will be back with all the coverage of the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight this week. And then we'll be back next week. Eugene Robinson and I and Dallas Winston will be back tomorrow for the final MMA three-way with Eugene and Dallas and I. And we're going to talk about the Jon Jones situation, and we're going to talk about Mayweather and Pacquiao and what it all means for an MMA fan. So join us then. Adios, MMA aficionados. This is Kid Nate.